docket my man Rod Hairston. Rod is, I don't even really want to introduce you, dude, because you're just cool and don't even need it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I met Rod 4 or 5 years ago, watched him speak. I don't normally watch a lot of speakers because I like to be on the stage doing the talking, but he said some stuff that resonated with me, not only from a mindset perspective and an identity perspective, but how we can change and how we can grow and how we can elevate our lives, that just hit home. Actually knocked me on my ass. Can I say that? I just did. Yeah. It was fantastic. So I'm hopeful that he's going to be able to do the same for you. Mr. Rod Hairston of Envision You.
Hello everyone, how you guys doing? Excellent. Well, I'm going to first start out by saying I'm not from Detroit, but I've learned to love Detroit. So my business was invested in by Dan Gilbert, and I had to move to Detroit. And so not living in Detroit, you hear things about Detroit, and I'm like, I gotta go where? Detroit. You hear about the winter, you hear all these stories. I had never come. So I moved to Detroit, and I would go home and I would tell people how great the city was. Now what's really great about the city are the people. And what I want to tell you something today is a little bit about yourselves from an outside perspective. Sometimes you need somebody to come from outside to tell you. And sometimes you need to leave the city to come to appreciate what you actually have. Am I right? Sometimes you can be stuck in a mindset, have the best intention, but what do they say? The pathway to hell is paved with what? Good intentions, right? So you have people that's got really good intentions, but their strategies, their principles, what they're focused on, it's not the right way. So I want to give you just some tips in a few minutes that I have from an outside perspective and a city that I've learned to love. Number one, I grew up in Hairston, New Jersey, and it was really tough. Very similar to some of the stories you hear. In fact, the school I went through was East Side High. You remember the movie? Yeah. Right? So what's interesting about that city is when I left the city, I went into the military. And I went into special warfare, and they put us through some really interesting training. But what I noticed is as I was going through, one particular school I went through was survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. And supposedly it was the hardest school, right? They were going to teach you how to survive any situation, evade any situation, resist any situation if you got captured, and then escape. And it was really, really tough. But as I was going through the school, I noticed that a lot of the things I was going through are the same things I grew up with, right? Things that were unfair. You were cold, you were beat up, right? Things, you know, I was called a night fighter, so they made things unfair. And at night we would talk and they would say, look, Rod, all this is making you stronger. It's making you tough. And I would go, okay, right? And then I would say, they lied to me. They promised it. Hey, we all go through that. It's making us tough. We're going to be the most elite force in the world once we go through all of this crap. So I'm waiting for like the things you see on TV, the movies. They would say, hey, if you do this, you're going to get that. Little simple things. And you would say, wait a minute, that was unfair. And they would say, hey, this is going to make you tough. It's going to make you mentally and emotionally so strong. It's just like resistance, man. Hang in there. So we all graduated to school, and we were like, wow, so what are we supposed to do? Be a victim because we got beat up? We got beat up, or are we going to be a victor? Are we going to put an emblem on our chest saying we're the best, the most elite force? So we all chose to say we were the most elite, and we started acting that way and carrying ourselves that way. And I started thinking back, like, I grew up this way. So I started telling people, like, I went through double training. I grew up with a single mom. I grew up running from gangs. I grew up, so I must be a double badass. So that's what I started carrying myself as. Right? And I would walk into situations thinking that every tough thing that I went through, my mind would use it. Now think about this, guys. We have 10,000 billion brain cells. You won't even use 1% of your potential in the areas of creativity, memory, or problem solving. Not even 1%. We thought it was 10% at one point. So everybody in this room, everybody in this city, the hardware is amazing. It's the software. The software comes down to the meanings that you attach to things. And every meaning is defined by you. So I remember just thinking, and I started thinking, well, I'm lucky. How am I able to build businesses and grow and move the cities, and other people that grew up that were smarter than me couldn't? It's because I got lucky enough to define things a different way, even though we went through the same experiences, right? So you gotta believe, which simply means is that you gotta create certainty from an internal place instead of looking outward. And the individuals that can do that, the speaker beforehand talked about that. The artist did a great job of talking about just really utilizing what's here already to say, this is my certainty, but it's a mindset, right? A feeling of certainty about something. Mind and body are one. So the more powerful my body can be, my mind will follow. If my mind is strong, my body will follow, right? So how I carry myself, how I say it to other people, right? How much conviction I have in my voice. The references, if I can't create real experiences, then I need to create synthetic experiences. Again, one of the things that the artist talked about beautifully was a metaphor in putting beautiful things on abandoned buildings so that it reframes the experience, right? That creates that level of certainty. That allows the mind, again, the nervous system, again, cannot stand uncertainty. So it might want to, everybody wants to have $1 million. Everybody wants to grow. Everybody wants to expand. We desire it. But if it's not our identity, we will sabotage it. And we will stop. And we will continue finding reasons why we can't make it happen. So utilizing your imagination, recognizing that you already have an identity that's magnificent. Going and doing research on really how the mind works is what we really have to do. Number two, which ties into belief, is just your physiology. Sometimes you have to be it before you can have it. Does that make sense? Sometimes you have to be it before you can have it. When we create the vision of what we want the city to be, the city we want to create, how are we going to be? How are we going to carry ourselves? Even if our grandchildren have to be the ones to really see that vision fulfilled, how are we going to carry ourselves? Right? How are we going to be? One of the more brilliant things about Dr. Martin Luther King is what it was, his power in his presence. Right? He lived like he was there. He spoke as he was there. He didn't have trying in his talks. And that's why the legacy can continue to live on. Well, we got to think about let's look at this city and let's start carrying ourselves that way, and that conviction will spread. Remember, 55% of all communication is your body language. 38% is your tone. Your words only equal 7%, right? So how are we going to carry ourselves? What does that theme look like? How do I want to represent this Create Detroit to everybody else that I'm talking about? Number three, which is really interesting, is an external focus. When you have a challenge, you got to remember your mind is magnificent, and it always has the answers. How many people here have lost their keys and you're in a hurry, you keep looking in the same 3 spots for your keys and you can't find them, right? And then all of a sudden the phone rings or something happens and your mind is distracted from looking for your keys. What happens? You find the keys, right? You're trying to think of somebody's names and you're distracted. What happens? You remember it, right? The mind always has it. The conscious mind gets in the way. So what you want to do is you want to create an outcome, a vision of what you want to accomplish, and then you get out of your way by helping somebody else. And when you come back to that challenge, you'll be surprised what's waiting for you, right? But that's the metaphor that we need to use for the city and how we do it, right? We need to be focused on Detroit is the leader. Detroit, from an outside perspective, I like Oakland County, but Detroit has got to come back because it's the big daddy.
That's right.
Right? Detroit needs to start thinking about how it's going to help Oakland County.
That's right.
Right? How it's going to help Lansing, how it's going to help Michigan. We start thinking that way. Don't just forget saving it. Start thinking about how it's going to lead the state all over again and watch what happens. Now, I know that's audacious, and I know that somebody from the outside can say all of that. Just trust me a little bit. Trust me. Trust me in watching cities overseas, watching cities that thrive. Trust what I'm saying, and just maybe take a little bit of it. So that external focus. And then the last thing I want to share with you today is OPA. OPA stands for Outcome, Purpose, Action. Outcome, Purpose, Action. Now, again, the mind is a cybernetic system, and I love kind of talking about it because we had to learn a lot of these things in the military and working with the CIA. Everything was about how you thought, where you put your energy, where you put your focus. One of the things Terry talked about was the 4 laws of focus, that the mind has so much capacity, it can make real what you want to make real. The reticular activating system will make real what you believe and what you decide to focus on. So the mind, the cybernetic system, has to have a target, right? So before you take any action, you got to know the outcome that you want to accomplish. Clear-cut outcome. Don't confuse it with purpose. It's an outcome. I want to make, if your goal is to make money, you got to say, I want to make $15,000 by March the 31st, 2014. That is an outcome. There's no sexiness in it. It's clean. It's got a date. You know what it is. Now, the purpose is, why do you want it? Why do you want it? Purpose is what drives you emotionally. Outcome drives the cybernetic mind. Purpose drives the emotional center. Why do you want that? Why do we want to create a new Detroit? Why? Well, because we should. Well, why? The more compelling you make your why, the more emotional power you have to do it. And then the last things are the actions that you're going to take to get there. Now, why that's important is because you have to remember, like I talked about before, collective consciousness is very powerful. Collective consciousness comes from all people all focused on the same thing. It all comes from having a theme and focus together, right? And we knew that. When we deployed, we always made sure everybody had the same focus. That was the most important thing, more than anything else, right? Are we focused on the same objective, the same outcome? Because 4 laws of focus, right? What you focus on, you find. What you focus on, you find. I never believed in ghosts. I never saw a ghost until I went to a building that everybody said was haunted, right? And somebody gave me a book, and I started reading the book. Guess what I started seeing? Ghosts, right? I just started because I was focused on ghosts. What you focus on grows. Not only did I see a ghost, I started seeing ghosts everywhere. Going to the bathroom, I see a ghost. At 5 o'clock, I was out of that building, right? I didn't care if the door was locked. I didn't care about anything. What you focus on seems real. Remember, folks, everything, when you hear from an outside perspective, everybody, I'll talk to Terry, and Terry will tell me how great Detroit is and the strategy and how it's going to work. I'll go talk to somebody else back in Oakland County or back in Bloomfield, and they'll tell me why it will never work. They're both right. There is no right way. Right? Everything is created. Who cares about the old references or the old strategies or how it's supposed to be done? How will come when we believe that it's absolutely what we're going to do. And you get collective consciousness.